What is the nicest thing someone has ever done for you? This happened during the dark days of my childhood, in the mid-80s. I was 10 years old, and I was having serious problems with my family, mostly my father, and was doing absolutely miserably at school. That year, I had the bad luck to have a really bad music teacher. Now, music wasn't a big subject, we had one lesson a week, but that person made it a living hell for me. Looking back now, I think he was just a quirky character, but he had an extremely short fuse and was prone to switching from hearty, belly laughter to shouting and roaring at someone for nothing at all at the drop of a hat. I just never knew where I was with him, and adding that to my problems at home just brought me to the brink. One day in December, my mother had promised she'd come to school on the day we had music lessons, and she'd have a word with him. So I stood in front of the classroom, waiting for her. And she didn't show up. My brain just went into complete panic mode. I could not face that teacher on my own for another lesson, I just couldn't. So I walked away, and walked out of the school. I walked through the town. I walked through the outskirts of the town, and through the industrial area around that. I walked through the first village, then the second village. It was very cold, and there was a lot of snow on the ground, so I wasn't walking fast, but I just kept walking. At some point, a car pulled up next to me, and a man, probably in his 30s, winds down the window and asks me if I wanted a lift. I said no, thank you. I had no idea where I was heading myself, after all. And as a young girl, I had been warned about taking lifts from strange men. I just kept walking. Through the next village, and the next. It was beginning to get dark. I had started to cry. I was feeling worn out, and tired, and so cold. I must have been walking for the better part of 6 hours at that point. Then that same car pulled up next to me again, and the same man asks if I wanted a lift now. I really didn't care about anything anymore, so I got in. It was warm in the car. He started chatting to me, easy and friendly. Even offered me a cigarette, which I found very odd. Eventually, he got me to open up a bit and tell him why I was walking down country roads in the middle of winter all by myself. How I felt my parents would be better off without me, how I felt they didn't care and hated me. He kept talking to me about my family. Who else I have who might care about me? So I tell him about my grandmother. I've always been really close to her. He's asking me if I wouldn't like it if he dropped me off to her house? And then see if maybe I can stay with her instead of my parents? I'm just so exhausted at this point, and I agree. He turns the car around and drives back. And on the way, he tells me that he'd been thinking about me on that road the whole day, since he had first asked me if I needed a lift. That he'd left work early, to drive around and see if he could find me, to make sure I was okay and safe. He dropped me off outside my grandmother's house, and drove off. My grandmother gave me the longest, hardest hug anybody had ever given me, and I stayed with her for the next couple of weeks, until things settled a bit. I never told anybody about getting a lift from a total stranger, but I've never forgotten him. And I never will. If I ever find myself in a similar situation, I hope I'll be as sweet and